welcome to our Friday morning devotional. My name is Debbie Casanzio. I'm a pastor of Discipleship Ministries, and it's a joy to be here with you on this Friday morning. And this one particularly, it's my last Friday devotion with you as I prepare to head out to serve my new church next month. It's been a joy to be able to serve you these last 7 years, and my goodness, I am truly going to miss all of you and the gift that you have been to me in my years of ministry here. But today we're centering ourselves on this moment and this day. And I wonder, if I ask the question, how is it with your soul? What might you say? It's been a heavy week, hasn't it? I know it is for many people that I've talked to. It has been for me. I mean, whether we're trying to figure out how we re-enter into community with others on this side of COVID, which is still alive and existing amongst us, and finding ways to be safe and protect others from the fear of the illness, to the economic recession that we're finding ourselves in. So many folks, I know several of you, who are out of work, uncertain about work. And then we have the other virus that's right here in our midst, the virus of racism that's come to light in front of us. In all of this, we're left with those questions: what can we do? What ought I to do? At least that is for me. I've been asking myself a lot this week, how can I affect change? Where do I affect change? And what do I do with the privileges that I have? And how can I be a person that uplifts others that are being harmed? Whenever we're having negative emotions, whether it's sadness, despair, anger, fear, doubt, there's three things that we typically lean in and doing, and that is either we flee, we fight, or we freeze, right? I'll tell you, I'm a freezer. When it comes to negative emotion, I immediately freeze and I try to figure out what to do. I know a friend of mine is a big fighter, and so they will go at it all guns a-blazing. And another friend of mine, boy, she will tell you, boy, she can run to the hills and out of Dodge in 2 seconds until she gets her thoughts and her mind together around it. Well, this week, there were two things that have brought me a sense of peace and a sense of courage, you might say. And it comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, and the other is the Serenity Prayer. So let me start with Ecclesiastes. I stumbled upon this devotion about Ecclesiastes, and I want to share with you what the writer said. The writer said that when they were in the midst of facing their own despair, the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes grappled with it. Now, Ecclesiastes is found in the Old Testament. It's considered one of the wisdom books of literature that we have. And in this book, we hear the writer grappling with his own uncertainties. He's searching for happiness, and he searches for happiness through pleasure, we find. He searched through happiness through grand work projects. He searches for happiness through riches and philosophical inquiry. And his assessment is this. We read about in chapter 2. He says, all of it's meaningless, a chasing after the wind, he says. For none of these things is immune to death, disaster, or injustice. The book of Ecclesiastes oftentimes is referred to a book that feels very depressing because the author continues to say over and over again, all of this is meaningless. We read in the book that the author is bemoaning the futility of work because in the end, we leave what we've worked for to somebody else who hasn't worked for it, in addition to the fact that we don't know if the inheritor is going to use it wisely or foolishly. I gotta tell you, I've been doing a lot of moaning this last week, and I get it. How many times do we find ourselves chasing after the wind, working, striving for something, thinking that we're going to accomplish it on our own? It's interesting because when I look at what the writer of Ecclesiastes says, it helps me to find hope in that sense of meaninglessness. One commentary said one thing that the writer of Ecclesiastes does is bring us back from despair. Because despite life's trials, we can find fulfillment when God is a part of living and our working. For in chapter 2, verse 25, he says, "For without him, who can eat or find fulfillment?" And then in chapter 12, he says, "Life at times can feel meaningless, but remember your Creator." And then later he says, "Don't exhaust yourself trying to figure out life, but fear God and keep his commandments." That was the verse that struck it for me. Don't exhaust yourself trying to figure it out. You see, what the writer of Ecclesiastes came to is that without God as our center, well, then life's pleasures and sorrows only lead us to disillusionment, despair, frustration. But with God at the center, well, then we can find meaning, even in the meaninglessness, because we're trusting God will work things out in the end. And I needed to know that this week. I needed to be reminded that I'm to place my trust in God. When I get stuck in my own thoughts, when I get stuck with my own righteous anger, there is a particular prayer that I turn to that realigns me about every time. And it seems to bring me not just peace, but it brings me courage to move forward. And it's the serenity prayer. Now, I don't know about you, but some of you might have this sitting in your home. I discovered this at my mother's house. Anybody have one of these? It is a cross stitch of the serenity prayer that says, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." This prayer I've prayed, I can't tell you how many times, and it does bring me peace, and it helps me to align to what I can change and to have the courage to step into it. But over the last several years, I've been reintroduced to the full version of that prayer. It was written by Reinhold Niebuhr, and I want to read you the full prayer because it says, "God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, and taking as Jesus did this sinful world just as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you, Lord, will make things right if I surrender to your will, so that I might be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next." You see, God is the one that makes things right. We are just invited to simply have the courage to listen and to act in ways that honor and glorify God. Pretty simple when I boil it down to that. And so it had me ask this question this week. Maybe it's a question for you as you enter today or even this weekend. But you might ask yourself, what is not in your control that you need to give over to God and let God work it out? But then you might want to ask yourself the question, where might you tap into courage and wisdom to change the things you can? We're all called to different ways to engage change. And in this last week, we've seen different ways in which people have addressed change, to have the courage to step in, to serve others, to make a difference. For some, it's been marching. For some, it's writing letters. For some, it's been serving the most vulnerable. And for others, it's to be in real relationships, especially with those that are different from themselves. What speaks to your heart as you get quiet and seek God's wisdom. You know, the end of the book of Ecclesiastes says, "The end of the matter all has been heard, for fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone." We are to lean into God, to keep his commandments. I saw a Facebook post this week that said, when Jesus said, "Love your neighbor," he knew our neighbor would act and look and believe and love differently than you. Isn't that kind of the whole point? And so as I close this devotional time this morning for you, I'd like to read that serenity prayer again. This time I want you to meditate on the words as I read them and ask yourself what word or phrase might speak to you right now. How might you carry that into your day? So sit comfortably and let us hear the words of that prayer for ourselves today. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, and taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I might be reasonably happy in this lifetime and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Well, amen, my friends, and I look forward to seeing all of you on Sunday in worship as we gather together and explore another book of wisdom, but the book of Proverbs. Have a blessed weekend.